letting go of perfection, it really begins with understanding yourself and understanding why you feel a certain way about when you create and when you feel that pause to say, you know what, I'm I'm not good enough for this, or what I did isn't good enough, and I'm going to stay in this position. I found that in the people that I've coached and people that I even care about that deal with perfectionism, it often creates a pause, but it's a pause that really shouldn't be there. It's like you're about to ship something, and you're like, it's not quite good enough. You're about to apply for that position or that role. You're about to do that startup. I'm not quite ready. So many of us, and I have my master's, so I'm not judging anybody that does the higher education. But part of perfectionism is feeling like you always have to keep getting more and more validity and more acceptance and more credentials. So folks that have like 3 PhDs and all those things, but they haven't actually been in the workforce, or they haven't actually created anything. They've just been studying it. At a certain point, to be frank, all of us run out of time. That could be part of perfectionism as well. So we're going to get into 4 questions you can ask yourself to work on your perfectionism, as well as give a smattering of books, of course. Shout out to short form, a smattering of books, many of them that are available in short form, as well as some previous Bring Your Worth episodes that would apply to it. Before, I totally forgot. I can tell I'm on some other stuff right now. Today is the 400th episode. So it's been 400 episodes, almost 4 years of hanging out with me hanging out with you, 18,000 plus subscribers and all that. Thank you so much for the love and support. Back in 2020, December of 2020, it was the equinox. And I guess that's not the equinox. I guess it's the winter solstice. So it was like December 19th, 20th, or something like that. When I started, thank you so much for the love. And I so appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. So 400 episodes. And the tough thing is that if you're kind of stuck in the loop of perfectionism, you're not going to make it as far as getting that far. It's like you're so focused on making sure that things are perfect or correct. And if you go through the 400 episodes, plenty of content. I'm sure it's like 2 months worth of episodes now, if you just played it straight on YouTube or what have you. They are far from perfect. And I won't even bring up some of those things. Speaking of shame and guilt, ways that I've screwed up this channel. But yet, we survived. And you guys hung in there with me. And so many of us expect other people to think that we're perfect, when in reality, they just want to see us thrive and to do the very best that we can. So the first question, one other thing too. Sorry, see, I'm all over the place today. I talked about perfectionism in today's newsletter. I have a newsletter at joindamon.me. Why perfect is overrated. I really enjoyed writing this for you guys. It's a really short essay talking about that. It's part of my weekly newsletter available at joindamon.me, or you can just click the link below. And that would also help support the channel. You'll find out what's going on with me, special coaching tools, and other things that are exclusively available there. But it goes deeper into the conversation. So the first question you want to ask yourself is, and let me go ahead and take this down to make sure there's enough room, because this is a long question, so I want to make sure that you guys can see the whole thing. Suddenly I got to ask it. When you feel like you aren't doing enough, are you feeling guilt or shame? When you feel like you're not doing enough, are you feeling guilt or shame? We can take a step back here, and for a lot of us, we get guilt and shame mixed up. We think they're the same. They're actually not. And this definition comes from Dr. Brene Brown as well as some other people, but Brene Brown is the main definition that I use. Guilt is when you feel like you should be doing something, either something better, or more likely you should be taking some type of action, but you're not. So it's an internal judgment to say, yeah, I should have hit the gym this morning, but I didn't. I feel guilty about that. That's a simple example. It's usually internal. Shame actually is the opposite of that. Shame is when you feel like you should have done something or perhaps done something better, and you're afraid other people are going to judge you. It's an external instrument. As you might imagine, with guilt and with shame, guilt can eat you up quite a bit, but shame is really, really corrosive. And it's corrosive in the sense of you're actually giving away your power. And there's always going to be, what is it, 8 billion people in the world, if not already, right? If not soon. So 7.5, 8 billion people in the world. I don't care if you're the biggest superstar on the planet, have all the money on the planet. You imagine some of the people I'm thinking about, those insecurities as far as what other people think will continue to haunt you. You can have the most beautiful person that you're married to or going out with or whatever. You can have beautiful kids, beautiful house, you know, straight up, what is it, talking heads. This is not my beautiful wife. This is not my beautiful house. You can go through that spiral, be through the opposite of that. And if you are conducting from a place of shame, then whatever you do is never going to be good enough because there's always going to be someone who might have an opinion. And sometimes they're actually going to have a point where you could have done better if you had different resources or had a different perspective. And sometimes that's true. But when we're run by shame, we allow that to eat us up inside. And that's what makes it so difficult to work with that, you know? There you go. My shift came from my mentor. You're okay is everyone else is fantastic. You're okay, as in you're pretty good, is everyone else is fantastic. And that would shift you. I remember us talking about, thank you for the feedback. You're pretty good, just okay, is everyone else is fantastic. So often the measuring stick that we have, particularly if we're dealing with perfectionism, and I don't consider myself a perfectionist, but I definitely have been in that arena where I've suddenly caught myself where it's redoing something for the umpteenth time, not uploading a video for y'all, not wanting to go on live because my hair isn't perfect, like whatever, whatever. We've all dealt with those types of things. If you're not dealing with those types of things, you might not be pushing yourself enough. But if you are feeling those things, you might be going into new territory, which is where the insecurity might come from. But it's important to know if you're feeling bad because you have a higher standard for yourself, guilt, or if you're feeling bad or perfectionist about it because you're afraid that other people are going to judge you. Again, the most corruptive perfectionism and the one that I've seen in my coaching clients and even folks that I've interacted with, the most difficult one is when it's built around shame because you really have to tame the beast because there's literally always going to be other people's opinions. I probably deal with guilt more than shame, so that's a little bit easier. Where it's like, oh, okay, well, Damon, you can adjust your standard, and then that kind of calms you down. Meditation, other things I talked about in recent previous episodes, episodes on transition, other things. A lot of the links are below. You can just subscribe right now and see the recent episodes right before this 400th one. That actually helps you get grounded. If you're dealing with shame, though, that means that you have to kind of call back those voices and find out where they're coming from. And sometimes those voices are coming from, you know, the way we were raised. They're coming from an intense criticism that cut us deep when we were in elementary school. I still remember some of those criticisms when my kids are 8 and 11. I still remember some of those criticisms that some of the less nice teachers said to me. And that was decades ago, as you can tell by my gray hair. So sometimes those voices actually aren't our own. We just internalize them. And often that ends up representing where shame comes from. A good example to go deeper into this is Brene Brown, Dr. Brene Brown, be respectful here. Her first book, The Gifts of Imperfection. This is a lesser known one because her next book, I want to say, was Rising Strong. Was it Daring Greatly? I think Daring Greatly was her second book. And that's when, she took off. That's around the time I went to my first TED and saw her speak in person, blew my mind. Da, da, da. So this is before everything took off. A classic, old school one. It's right in the title, The Gifts of Imperfection. Why being perfect and having things perfect is overrated. It's so important to have this part of the conversation, particularly as I've talked about, I'm a parent. And so I'm having those conversations with my boys darn near every day, definitely weekly, as far as they get out into the quote unquote real world, as that feedback starts to come in, separating their internal standard and their personal best from what other people might do or say. And sometimes that shame isn't imaginary. Sometimes people are actually being critical of you. I dealt with that a lot recently, and I had to do my own check-in of myself and be like, this person's opinion or this organization's opinion does not define me. This book is into that and more. Definitely check it out. I think all of Dr. Brown's books are classic. My personal favorite is Rising Strong, but you know this one is also a classic as well. And of course, talking about Dr. Brown, not me, but her. I'm not a doctor yet. What's the difference between shame and guilt? It gets a lot deeper into what I just broke down for y'all. Definitely worth checking out. And I think that might give some insight as far as that's concerned. If you're dealing with perfectionism, or if you consider that you're a perfectionist, do you feel like you're dealing more with guilt, which is feeling like you should do more in an internal way, or more dealing with shame, where you're afraid that you're going to be found out, that you're not doing as much as you think you should be? Let me know in the comments. Even if you're watching the replay, go and throw something in there. I think it's really important to kind of figure out where that's coming from. I think that's key to dealing with perfectionism. So the first question, when you feel like you aren't doing enough, are you feeling guilt or shame? I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown, here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You're watching Bring Your Worth TV live on Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe for free. And you can grab the new book, the complete Bring Your Worth collection, available wherever fine books are sold. And you can also listen to the audiobook on your favorite platform, including Spotify, and listen to it right here for free. And you can catch some of the recent episodes on Spotify and check it out. Yeah. And recovering perfectionist probably guilt. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really, I appreciate that. And I think it's important to kind of separate what those two feelings are, because then you can address them in a deeper way, as we'll talk about in other questions. Thank you so much for your comment. All right. So today we're talking about how to let go of perfectionism, live Q&A. You can jump in the comments. Let us know how you're feeling about that and how you're dealing with your own perfectionism. So next question is, when was the last time you were proud of something you created? When was the last time you were proud of something that you created? As creators, as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, even as far as, again, back to parenting and other things, there's so much emotional labor. If we care, there's so much emotional labor that we put into the work that we're doing and leadership that we're doing. How often do we say, hey, Damon, talking to myself, I did a really good job. I showed up as best as possible. How often does that happen? I found that when we kind of get lost in the throes of perfectionism, psychiatrists often talk about voices, not as far as psychiatric, but voices as far as the voice in our head. And there's always a dialogue in our head if you think about it. That's why meditation and other things are so important. Walking long distances, taking long showers, taking a bath, whatever it is that gets you into that zone, taking a nap, because then we're able to separate the voice in our head from our true feelings. It becomes the voices in our head that are saying, yeah, Damon, you screwed up. They tend to be a lot louder than the ones that said, hey, Damon, you showed up really well. Good job. Often it could be lopsided to one particular thing. So when we talk about when's the last time you were proud of something you created, it requires not only pausing and giving yourself flowers, as they say nowadays, um, to a recent action or even a past action that you did, but it also requires hearing that voice that says you did a good job. And that has to be turned up more than the one that says you screwed up. Because personally, the one that says I screwed up, and I have a solid ego too, but that can yell pretty loud. I'm like, why are you so loud? Yes, I know. I know I screwed up this video. Yes. I know I could have said something nicer in that instance. Yes. I know that I sent that out and it had three different errors in it. Yes, I'm aware of that. Yes, yes, yes. As someone said recently, and I wish I could remember who said it over the last few years. It's like, have you tried? I think it might have been Pema Chodron. the monk who I talk about quite a bit on this channel. I think it was something to the effect of you tried beating yourself up to become a better person. It seems like that didn't work out. How about you try the other way? Actually give yourself love. It's the same exact argument. We beat ourselves up, we do the self flagellation, all this stuff because we think that's going to make take us to the next level. Sometimes we do need to be hard on ourselves and show up. Again, this is the 400th episode. I can't thank you guys more, but I had to be hard on myself to show up 400 times. This through a pandemic and little kids and all kinds of personal stuff going on. So sometimes you have to be tough on yourself, but that doesn't mean you have to beat yourself up. Those are two separate things. Discipline is different than criticizing yourself. Discipline is saying, I'm going to show up for you guys at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time, live on Wednesdays as much as physically possible. I'm going to do bonus episodes on Sunday. I'm going to do shorts, all the things that are available at bringyourworth.tv. Again, you can subscribe below. But the proof is in the pudding. I've showed up for y'all consistently. That's discipline. When I miss episode or it doesn't work out as well as I thought, then that's when I need to be really careful. That's when it's like, okay, we can go into criticism territory. Me beating myself up because I missed an episode or it didn't go as well or my mic was messed up and I didn't realize it or I realized it was spinach in my teeth, whatever the vibe is, that's not going to help get us there. What will help us get us there, though, is saying, I had pride. I was happy. I was thankful that I was able to show up in this particular way. I did it. As I talked about in my newsletter, the link is below, and I mentioned it earlier in the show. You can read it at joindamon.me. There's been so many major transitions I've been through, and frankly, so many people I love have been through a ton of transitions too. It just seems to be that year of transitions. As I talk about the newsletter, the amount of seasons that are changing, it seems like we're between seasons, and it's everything feels like it's in transition. Many of us would not make those three, four, in my case, five different transitions simultaneously that I went through this year would not be possible if I didn't have gratitude and recognize how well I showed up. Even if it wasn't as well as I wanted it to be, it was my personal best. That comes down to creating, that comes down to leadership, that comes down to any endeavor that requires some level of discipline. That's what I'm getting at. If you're going to have that discipline, you need to be gentle with yourself and actually congratulate yourself when you are able to show that discipline. And it might not be to the level that you want, but it might be the best that you can do at this moment. If you want to go deeper into this idea, one of my favorite books by one of my favorite people, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Hope you're doing wonderful, Stephen. Hope you're doing well. Fantastic book. You can see the dog ears and it's turning brown. It's gonna be my complexion in a second. This book is old. I've had it for at least a dozen years. One of my favorite books of all time. Break through the blocks and win your inner creative battles. Stephen talks about quite a bit in here, but it's extremely simple. Again, it's really big type, so it's not a really long book. I want to say it's 120 pages. What am I talking about? It's not even that. You can read it in the afternoon. I like to savor it. I probably read it about once a year or so. He has this argument saying that there's something called the resistance. The resistance is basically saying that voice, going back to voices, that voice in your head that's saying, yeah, you're not good enough. You need a little bit more accreditation. You need a little bit more work, and you're not ready for the public. You're nowhere near the level of these other people who are really the masters at the game. And as you can imagine, his argument is saying, no, actually, you have to fight through that resistance because the resistance is lying. Masters become masters because they do the work. They put their behind in the seat. That's it. And I'm middle aged. His book writing career didn't really start until he was a little bit younger than me. And he's pretty well known now if you're familiar with art and creating and you know the work um, of Elizabeth Gilbert with Big Magic and and some of the older, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Like this is in that fashion, and he's one of the leaders in that discussion now for sure. And I've talked with the guy, like he's on that level. What's brilliant about it though is that to be able to find and clarify how you're going to impact the world and how you're going to serve the world at not a young age, that's a different vibe. I think he might have wrote this when he was like 40. The amount of wisdom in here is incredible. And here's to having a life well lived. So shout out to you, Mr. Pressfield. As you know, I love your work. Fantastic book you should have on your shelf. Out of all the books that I recommend here, this one is probably the best one if you're feeling stuck in the energy about it. And exactly, it's in the practice. It's in the practice of doing the work. That's how you become better. And you may never master what it is. I don't plan on mastering, you know, 400 episodes in. I don't plan on mastering hanging out with y'all. Or I'm a keynote speaker. I've done a few TED talks. I'm nowhere near a master at doing those. But that's not the point. How many things do you want to venture at, and then you get it perfect when you do it the first time? What's after perfection? Sounds pretty boring to me. If you want to watch a video that talks about this even more, it's about consistency, the practice, as the comment says. Watch this now, live Q&A. This was probably at the top of the summer, I want to believe. And it's about how to be consistent. And yeah, there's a lot of good tips in there. I'm really proud of this particular episode because something that I talk to a lot of my coaching clients as well as a lot of y'all that watch the show about how to show up consistently. Again, we're episode 400 today. So, please listen to some of that advice. And a lot of that advice actually doesn't come from me, but from the Stephen Pressfields and the Elizabeth Gilberts and the people that I honor as far as being wonderful mentors, whether I know them personally, like Stephen, or don't know them personally. I appreciate all of y'all on the journey. So when was the last time you were proud of something you created? Let us know in the comments. Jump in. It might have been a while ago, or it might have been something earlier today. Even if you don't comment right now, just go through that process because that question will help you realize how loud those critical voices are versus those ones that really just want you to be better, to show up consistently. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown. I'm here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. This is Bring Your Worth TV. Wednesdays, 1:11. What time is it? 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can catch it on mess load of platforms right now. But if you want to subscribe to the main base here, you can subscribe right below at youtube.com/Brown Damon or just at bringyourworth.tv. And of course, the complete Bring Your Worth collection is available now. You can also listen to some select live shows on Spotify. You can expect more of that over there. And that's become a really fun platform so far to work with. So today we're talking about, excuse me, how to let go of perfectionism. And when is the last time you were proud of something you created? What past failure are you still replaying in your head? What past failure are you still replaying in your head? This is a heavy one. As I mentioned, I've gone through a lot of transitions, particularly this year. And if you're going through transitions, you're not going to be perfect at all. Uh, the transition just essentially is another word for chaos because you don't have your grounding yet. A lot of our perfectionist tendencies tend to come up or get amplified when we're going through a new area that we're actually quiet as kept, we're actually not supposed to know. We're not supposed to go through a transition perfectly. We're not supposed to have this tough conversation perfectly. We're not supposed to get into this new role perfectly. We're not supposed to do that. Now, if that's our criteria, then yes, we're going to be sorely disappointed. So when we're talking about perfectionism, we're really talking about idealism. In an ideal world, in this vacuum, I would operate in this way. If I already knew that was going to happen, I would operate this way. Well, of course you would have, as any sane person would, but you didn't know. You didn't have all the answers. Listen, if you had all the answers, it wouldn't be a transition because it wouldn't be anything new. Therefore, it's literally logically impossible for you to have all the answers. Because if you're doing the same old stuff, then it's not a transition. It's not anything new about it. So when we dwell on what past failure are you still replaying in your mind, when we're dwelling on those past failures, it's often our inability to recognize our own idealism, to realize I'm beating myself up over a situation that I had very little control over. I'm self-flagellating, which is hitting yourself with a whip or whatever. Like I'm hurting myself, proverbially, not literally. If you're literally doing that, please get a therapist. But if you're doing that psychologically to yourself, if you're hurting yourself, if it's often based on these high expectations, these, I would argue, unrealistic expectations that you're going to show up a certain way that was near to impossible to show up as. I have stuff from my childhood where I'm like, oh, I could have handled that better. I'm like, I was 4. Like, doesn't make any sense. I did, and likely you did, whatever seemed reasonable based on the resources and the knowledge you had at the time. You did whatever seemed reasonable based on the resources and knowledge you had at the time. Perfectionism and trying to make things perfect plays a game with us. It's some ethereal, liminal, abstract idea that we're supposed to live up to. But that's not why we're here. That's why we get into the guilt versus shame. Guilt is saying I should have showed up a certain way. Why didn't I show up that way? Shame is saying I didn't show up that way, and everybody knows it. Now I can't show my face. In either case, then that's when the compensation starts. When we start trying to overcompensate for so-called past failures. I remember interacting with someone. I'll I'll keep the names out of it. I remember interacting with someone and them saying, "Well, I don't feel guilt or shame because I'm over that, and it's a shame that other people do." And myself and other people that interact with this person all kind of looked at each other and like, "Oh, you just revealed." I used to play poker. We're just from Atlantic City. You just revealed your cards, right? It's like playing Uno with all the cards upside down or right side up. It's like, oh, you really feel a level of guilt or shame to the level where you can't even admit that you feel those things. That's some deep work. Not from a place of judgment. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if we feel this guilt or this shame or both, you can feel both around a past failure or sometime we weren't able to live up to those expectations we had in our head or that we felt like other people had for us, then overcompensation starts. I did a recent episode around summertime. It's all in the links about accepting your shadow and understanding your shadow side. It gets into that. Dr. Brown's work, Dr. Brene Brown's work gets into that. Whatever we don't reveal, we can't really heal. And we don't have to reveal it to other people, but we do need to work on our stuff. And if we don't work on our stuff, I guess you could say our stuff will work on us. And I remember having this moment with this person and with other people that were there. And it was a clear moment. We all kind of looked at each other. It's like, and whatever they weren't dealing with was crystal clear to us. But they were in such a sense of denial and probably over shame over whatever they experienced. That stuff was unprocessed. And who knows how else that might have been coming out in this person's life. When you know better, you do better. Be gentle with yourself. Exactly. From the great, another doctor, Dr. Maya Angelou. Thank you for the comment. I haven't heard that one in a long time. So, what past failure are you still replaying in your mind when you're about to launch that product or that service? When you're about to get on that stage and say something, if you're a speaker like myself, when you're about to seal that deal with that new customer, when you're about to address a community that you've been waiting to serve for so long, when you're about to apply for that grant or that scholarship or that funding, you're talking to VCs or what have you, and that little thing says, no, you're not. That's not you. What's replaying in your head? Often there's some type of pain, some type of wound that's there that needs to be addressed. And hopefully that example I gave, which I hope they're doing better, but it sounds like with the person that I was talking with, they had a lot of work to do. And hopefully they got to it. We all have work to do. Sometimes it's just more obvious to other people. If we want to go deeper into this, we cannot have this episode without my guy, Dan Nan Han. Let me move my fat finger so you can see it. There we go. No mud, no lotus. Rest in peace. He passed away about 2 years ago. Fantastic monk, um, Buddhist monk. I forget where he was based. I want to say in Nepal, but he moved around quite a bit. Actually, Martin Luther King Jr., that one, well before I was born, came to this guy, San Nan Han, to get insight into nonviolent revolution. Mm. He was Martin Luther King Jr.'s mentor. This guy was on some deep stuff. I think when he passed away, he was probably approaching 100. He had been around for a while. Fantastic book. The basic premise and the idea of this is that the lotus flower, which if you're familiar with yoga practices or if you've seen someone meditate, I think I had a recent episode on solitude, and I was in the lotus position. It's basically when you have like your legs crossed, crisscross applesauce, as they say at my kids' school, and then your hands out, in a particular position. That's called the lotus position because you're opening yourself up to whatever wisdom might come from the insights from the universe. We won't get too deep into it, but that's the lotus position. That's based on the lotus flower. The lotus flower, which I think is really common in like Thailand and kind of the Southeast Asia, including like Nepal, that actually comes from mud. No mud, no lotus. One of the most beautiful flowers in the world. It's usually like pink and it might be a little lavender. It's like beautiful. These pastel colors. It comes from the mud. Comes from the mud. They got it from the mud, as modern hip hoppers say today. Got it straight from the mud. Those toughest challenges that we have, they often end up creating the most beautiful results if we're resilient enough and if we're disciplined enough to get through those pains and those challenges. And as we talk about in this episode, to get over our perfectionism and to realize that the mud is part of the process. Who deals with mud and doesn't get dirty? Who raises a person from when they come out of the womb or later, for those folks that adopt or have step families, raises them until the parent is no longer there, when the parent's time to check out, and doesn't make mistakes or doesn't learn things. Who founds a company? I've founded two of them. Who's founded a company and not made mistakes, not lost sleep over a misjudgment or miscalculation, not sunk a company or nearly sunk a company because they were off base, end up losing a customer because they said the wrong thing or they addressed something differently. Then next time you show up better. When you know better, you do better. Again, thanks for the quote from Dr. Maya Angelou. I was a big fan of his before he passed. And then when he passed, I did a special episode 190. So like, man, like 200 episodes ago. Best Thich Nhat Hanh quote you need to hear right now. We're going through turbulent times. When I did this video, guess what? 210 episodes later, Still going through turbulent times. As I say in many of my books and sometimes on this show, this is something that we need right now in these turbulent times. And it's always turbulent times. There's always something new going on. That's what makes the world go round. One of my favorite songs right now, which I grew up with, but I'm really getting into now, is the Stylistics. People Make the World Go Round. Which, if you didn't hear the original one back in the early '70s, you would have heard the many remakes from Angela Bofield, rest in peace to her, as well as I think it's a guy named Mark Dorsey who actually did it for the Crooklyn soundtrack back in the '90s. I'm getting music nerd on you guys, but it's a fantastic song where it's like this is kind of how it works. There's ups, there's downs, there's challenges. What are we going to do with this mud when you're beating yourself up over a past failure? And it's okay to call it a failure if you feel that way. Okay, you had a past failure. Does that prevent you from moving forward? Does that close off all the doors? Was there nothing learned from that failure? And if all those things are, you know, are not true, or you have new opportunities, you learn something from it. Was it really a failure? Something to think about. You guys don't have to jump in the comments with whatever past failure you're feeling unless you feel like doing it, because I know it's a lot, and some of us have very heavy ones. I know I certainly have some. You know, first attempt at learning, exactly. Learning how to embrace both aspects as necessary in order to create the magic. Exactly. Yeah, I'm thinking about so many songs. Back to the song thing that talk about how you have to accept the mud to get the lotus. You have to get the wheat and the chaff. Every rose has its thorn. Child of poison. There's so many, right? Shout out to my '80s babies. But there's so many different things that represent that. There's a reason why in poetry and in song we hear that so often. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts too. And thank you for the comment about fail as well. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown, here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You're watching Bring Your Worth TV, Wednesdays, 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe for free. If you wanted to do any sponsorship of this show or the newsletter, and I'm available on multiple platforms, be sure to check out the link below. I do a lot of my sponsorship through passionfruit.com. It's spelled FROOT. They're a great partner. All the links are below. Or you can reach out to me directly and we'll see what's up. But I love partnering with folks that really want to connect with non-traditional entrepreneurs, side hustlers, solopreneurs, and people who, particularly in this day and age, want to make an impact on the world. And like I said, it's always time to make an impact in the world. To quote Seth Godin, what to do when it's your turn, and it's always your turn. You can get the complete Bring Your Worth collection. It's available now. It's book 27, and there's 7 books in this one, including some compilations. I think you guys would appreciate it. Thank you for the love and support. If you want to listen to the audiobook, you can get it on your favorite platform, as well as listening to it here at BringYourWorth.tv and fresh and new on Spotify. There's some limited episodes on there. I think we're going to focus on the live episodes. So if you prefer Spotify, head on over there. Check it out. Add me to your Spotify playlist. And also, almost all, maybe all at this point, of my audiobooks are also available on Spotify. So thank you, Spotify, for the partnership. What is the worst outcome? Excuse me. What is the worst outcome of you doing the best with what you have at the moment? What is the worst outcome of you doing the best that you can with this moment, with what you have at this moment? Such an important part of our discussion because whatever you're doing, you're going to have limited resources, period. You can have all the time in the world, but maybe your money's low. You can have a whole bunch of money, but maybe you don't have the physical energy to do it. I talk about this in Build From Now about the 4 or so different aspects. If you go to buildfromnowquiz.com, you can actually take a quiz to learn more about your aspects. All the links are below. I talk about this in my book that came out in 2021, which is actually included in this series as well. It's the green book that you see on the side. So you're going to be lacking something. I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that in a scarcity way. I mean that in just we're here on Earth, and so there's going to be limited things of whatever, right? In Built from Now, I give the example of you being a retired person who might have all the time in the world, right? But you might not have the financial resources depending on your situation. You might not have the energy because you're retired, so you're in a different place, et cetera, et cetera. Compare that to someone who is college age. And so they could have all the energy in the world to do all nighters, da, 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 if they're healthy otherwise. But they might be broke as a joke. And they might not have the attention span and the focus that, say, a retiree would have. A really simple example of that, that's one way that we can work on understanding where we are in the world right now, as far as our world, what season we're in, and what we're capable of doing. And if we understand what we're capable of doing at this point, then our standard isn't based on some abstract, with everything otherwise perfect, da da da. It doesn't operate in a vacuum. There's never a vacuum. There's I've done 27 books, 4 TED Talks, 2 startups, and a partridge in a pear tree. In all those situations, it was never perfect, ever, ever. There was always elements that were missing. There was always timelines that didn't line up. There was always stuff that I look back and I'm like, oh wow, I would have did that, and then we're gonna have triple the value. Like I shouldn't have signed that contract. Oh, what was I thinking? Well, I was doing the best that I can with what I got. If we're able to have an honest look at the resources we have, whether we're looking at our past failures, which we talked about earlier in the episode, or we're looking to the situation we're in now, what resources do you actually have? As I always say, I'm proudest of those moments where I showed up, did my best, regardless of the outcome, did my best, and understood I had one hand tied behind my back. Because often we have a finger, a hand, an arm, arm and a leg. We're not working at full capacity because that's not how life works. There are not, I've never found in all my adventures these perfect moments where everything lines up perfectly. I and the people I co founded with, or whatever, have everything we need and it goes smooth. Like, I, I've never experienced that. Jump in the comments if you've experienced that. Like, I would love to hear it, but I've never experienced that. And so, once you kind of set up those realistic things as far as what your resources are, then you can set realistic expectations. Again, what is the worst outcome of you doing the best with what you have at this moment? Are people going to laugh at you? Are you going to be, have to have the letter A on your chest and people are going to be throwing tomatoes at you through the neighborhood? Are you going to lose all your funding? Are people not going to love you anymore? Is your ego going to get bruised? In coaching, they talk about asking the whys. I've heard it with 3 whys. I've heard it with 5 whys. But let's just say 3 whys. I'm not going to do this because it's not ready. Well, why isn't it ready? Well, it's not ready because there's all these features that I promised that are not in it yet. So then why is that issue? What's the worst outcome with that? Well, people are going to be expecting all these different features that I promised. Okay, well, why or what will happen if you say those are going to launch later? And that this is your minimal viable product, or this is your prototype, or this is version zero point 0.9 instead of 0.1.0 to get nerdy for a second. And they will roll out eventually. Then suddenly you start to get to the meat of it. And it's like, oh, you feel bad that these features aren't in your particular app or product or service. You have those expectations and you're afraid people are going to call you on it. But what if they do? Does that mean you withhold what you have from people until this idealistic moment where you have the panacea and Shangri-La moment, whatever term you want to use, and then suddenly you're going to bestow it to the heavens? When I was launching my second app, Cuddler, I launched it with 2 other co-founders. Shout out to them. One was the artist, and one was the lead of the whole project. So I was more a COO slash CMO because I was doing the marketing as well as the day-to-day operations. We launched really quickly. It was the exact same time that um, my eldest, who's now 11, at that time he was 9 months old, 10 months old. Yes, he was almost one around time when I started with this app. We launched it shortly after his first birthday. The app ended up getting acquired right after his second birthday. So within a year, it was a whirlwind. Whirlwind. I talk about that again in the complete Bring Your Worth collection and have that conversation about it. Get an audiobook, links are below. And I wasn't sure if we were ready or if it made sense. The app that we had created, it felt like it was the time to launch it. And I'm pretty good with timing. I was like, it feels like it's the time to launch this app. It was called Cuddler, Connected People for Hugs. And a friend of mine at the time, you know who you are if you're watching. I appreciate you to this day. Up in Silicon Valley said, if you wait until you have everything you need and you wait until it's perfect, then that means it's too late. Straight from Silicon Valley. I was living in Silicon Valley right before I launched the app. She was right. All the apps, all the services, all the products that have revolutionized how we operate today, whether it's Facebook, now known as Meta, Google, now known as Alphabet, Amazon, Twitter, now known as X, but I mean really the old school Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. I know some of the inside stories with them. They were all simple and scrappy, and they worked with what they had. But that scrappy version that they launched to the audience was enough to build them up to the next level. But if they're waiting to be perfect, do yourself a favor. Do an online search on what the first version of Facebook looked like. Check out this channel. Go to bringworth.tv if you're not on there already. Go to the playlist where it's like the full Bring Your Worth episodes. In fact, the link is right below. What am I thinking? Link is right below. Click on that link. Go through the 399 episodes before this one. This is episode 400. Go to episode 1. Compare that to someone doing a video from a cave in a very dark place. You won't see that much of a difference. But it has to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. When we did Cuddler, the version we launched was missing 3 or 4 key things that we wanted to have in it. Within a week, it was the #1 app in the world. We're in the cover of the Wall Street Journal. If you don't believe me, you can just do an online search. Look for CUDDLR. I cannot make this stuff up. That was version 0.4, 0.6. It was definitely not 1.0, but that was enough to catch the world on fire. If we waited, again, shout out to my friend in Silicon Valley, if we waited until it was perfect, I would not be talking to you right now because it would never launched. And if it did launch, it would have missed that window. You have a limited window of opportunity for whatever you're trying to create. It's okay to have that kind of urgency. That urgency might get you out the door and out of your perfectionism. Something to think about. What is the worst outcome of you doing the best with what you have at the moment? Go through the worst case scenario. Your family stops talking to you. You're the laughing stock of Silicon Valley or of the community or whatever vibe, whatever people you're trying to serve, you're laughing stock for a week. We're in a quick news cycle. It's not like how it was even 10 years ago. Whatever you screw up, whatever you fail at, quote unquote, it's not going to be headlines for long. Trust me. Go through your worst case scenario. And as you keep going through those layers, maybe you can find out why you're really not moving forward. My favorite book on this topic, another doctor. I'm realizing I have almost all doctors here. Dr. Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap, one of my favorite books of all time. There's so many gems in this book, but basically talks about why we stop ourselves from growing, not the world stopping us from growing. You hear all this lip service. Some of it's lip service. Some of it's real. but some of it is lip service about how other people are holding us back. Hmm. At what point do we take accountability? At what point do we up level our game? Yes, there are factors and entities, and I won't turn this into another type of show. There are things that are blocking us, that are preventing us from being as great as we want to be. Absolutely. So does that mean we just sit down? What I love about the big leap is that it's all about the internal struggle. He doesn't talk about society. He doesn't talk about structures. He doesn't talk about who's in government. He doesn't talk about what. Nope. It's like, what are you doing about it? Sometimes we need to hear that. Yes, I have my share of political activism and I have my share of making movements and I've donated how I've donated and all those things. Don't sleep on that. I'm not trying to say that the world is perfect. What I'm trying to say though is that at the end of the day, it's about our accountability. My responsibility is to show up for you on Wednesdays. Doesn't matter who's in office, doesn't matter how much money I have or don't have, doesn't matter what client came through or what didn't come through, doesn't matter what book is out. I made a commitment to you. As Seth Godin said recently, talking about his book, his recent book about strategy. This is strategy. He recently said, a brand isn't a logo, it's a promise. A brand isn't a logo, it's a promise. The Bring Your Worth brand is a promise saying, okay, I've showed up for y'all 400 times in 4 years. That's part of my promise. Me just looking in the camera, talking to y'all, connecting with y'all. That's the vibes here. Dr. Hendricks gets into this in so many different ways. In the future, I could do a whole episode about Dr. Hendricks. Fantastic. Particularly this book is fantastic. It matters to this episode about perfectionism because he talks about something that changed my perspective. It's called an upper limit problem. It's when you have the opportunity to level up, you have a promotion that you can go for, you have an idea that's going to serve this particular community, you just need to launch this product or service. Someone's asking you to speak somewhere, and suddenly you have a chance to be on stage and connect with people, even though you're not a professional speaker. And then suddenly you get laryngitis, or suddenly you randomly trip on something and you break your leg and you can't show up for it. Or you say, you know what, I know you're offering me this position, but I'm not ready for it. All these instances, aside from perhaps some bad luck, we all have bad luck sometimes, these would be considered upper limit problems, where they compare it to like a thermostat, where we have an internal thermostat. See, used to the old school thermostat. You can tell. You can tell what era I grew up in. Not the buttons, not the nuts. No, you turn that son of a gun. It's like having a thermostat, and it's saying it's going to be 68 in this house. The weather could be up, the weather could be down. We're going to make sure it's level. Your 68 degrees might be, I always have to live paycheck to paycheck. That's how my family was. That's how my friends are. That's how I am. There's not enough money in the world. What does that mean? When you get a nice, say, six-figure job, before you know it, you're blowing through that money because your thermostat is saying, no, we're supposed to be at 68, son. Come on, fam. We're supposed to be at 68. I don't care how much money you make. This is a comfort zone. Your thermometer or thermostat, not thermometer, thermostat is set to here. It's supposed to be 68 degrees. So you could be a millionaire. You're still gonna be living paycheck to paycheck. Let's make sure that that happens because this is your comfort zone. That's the upper limit problem. As soon as he said that, which of course I put some South Jersey spice on it, but that's what he said. As soon as he said that, it blew my mind. I have the audiobook. I listen to it regularly. And woo, as soon as he said that, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm seeing all the upper limit problems that I have. Until you see that though, and you don't understand your assumptions underneath, you don't know. You don't know. So it's bringing those subconscious things to the surface. That's just one chapter in this amazing book. I just scratched the surface. Please grab the book if you haven't already. and it is definitely a vibe, you know? Thank you. I'm glad it resonated with you, you know? Whew. Speaking of, stop self-sabotaging. Talk about a nice segue. Live Q&A. It was like the beginning of the summer. I think it was May of this year here in Vegas. Yeah. How much stuff are you doing that's actually preventing you from being your greatest self? Your higher stuff is there. Your higher self is there. You want it to win, right? You want to be your best self. Listen, there's like 5 more weeks as of this recording, as you're watching me, as we're talking. There's 5 more weeks in the year. What do you want the next year to look like? I got some stuff written down on the wall over here that you can't see, but it's right over here. Making strategies and plans. Mm, I'm planning on having a good year, at least within the capacity of how I can make it a good year. It'll be the best year possible based on how I'm showing up. If you're ready to have that conversation, definitely check out that live show. Today, one of my favorite subjects. Again, I'm a business coach. I've coached hundreds of y'all. I love this subject. Stop self sabotage. Stop self sabotage. Blah, blah, blah. Get out of my mouth. Let's go ahead and define what self sabotage is. Let's talk about how you can stave it off. You might not be able to stop it, but you can slow it down a little bit. As they used to say in basketball, you can't stop someone, but you can contain them, right? You can't stop somebody, but you can contain it. So we're going to talk about that aspect. And lastly, we're going to talk about what you can do if you fall into that trap. I certainly have. And it's like, you have that moment. It's like, what the hell are you doing, Damon? Why are you doing that? And self-sabotage actually can prevent us from being our best self. And that's my ideal for you, is for you to be at your highest level, whether it's personally, professionally, mentally, emotionally, even physically, reaching those levels that frankly you deserve. But self-sabotage tends to come in when we feel like we don't deserve whatever we're getting. So let's get into the episode. If you have any questions or comments, or even want to share a moment where you end up sabotaging yourself, I'm definitely going to share some stuff here. Feel free to jump in the comments and let me know what's happening. All right, the first question. What is self-sabotage? Really important thing, because we talk about, oh, they sabotage themselves. They're sabotaging this project. I sabotage this. What exactly does sabotage mean? If you have my newsletter or at joindamon.me, you know I made a joke about it where I was talking about BC Boys sabotage. So feel free to go to joindamon.me and learn more about the deeper discussion in regards to self-sabotage and what it can mean in our lives. But for here, let's define it. As I said in the newsletter this morning, self-sabotage often happens when we haven't should be fully integrated our worth to our situation. Self-sabotage often happens when we haven't fully integrated our worth into our situation. In other words, if you have a fantastic relationship and they're everything that you want them to be, and they love you and all that stuff, and then you do something and it becomes a train wreck, you might not feel like you deserve that love. If you get this great job offer and it sounds like everything's lined up and it's all good, and then you come up with something almost like, if you guys used to watch Seinfeld, which I guess is a classic now, it's like 20 years ago, but those moments, you know the moments I'm talking about. If you watch Seinfeld, where it's like you're in this perfect situation and then you do something and it's like, why did you do that? Maybe you feel like you didn't really deserve the job. One of my guys, Carl Jung, it's weird to call him one of my guys, he was well passed away by the time I was around here, but one of my favorite philosophers, and of course, one of the forefathers, I should say, of modern sociology, says that which we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fade. That which we don't not bring to consciousness appears in our life as fade. So you ever meet somebody, or maybe you've been that person where it's just like, man, I almost had it, and then this thing happened, and I just have the worst luck in the world. And we've all had bad luck. I got my stories, but at a certain point, it's like you have to figure out what the common denominator is. If that happens to you 5, 6 times, there might be something that you're blocking or something that you're bringing up. And not even from a spiritual standpoint, not even that deep, but just literally certain actions or motives or changes that you're doing that are preventing you from having the success, that you want. Carl Jung kind of hit the nail on the head. He said this probably probably a century ago, back when he was coming out with his books. I have some other videos where I talk more about Carl Jung's work. That in link below, but we'll get into that in a second. Self-sabotage then is when you haven't fully integrated your worth to your situation. You might have a great situation, but if you feel like you don't deserve it, you're not worth it, you're not worthy of the situation, then it'll be like, let me knock myself down a peg. There's a lot of celebrities in the news right now. I'm not going to get into it. There always are a lot of celebrities in the news right now. And you think about their actions or the stuff that's come to light, and it's like, you seem to be at the pinnacle of where you're at. Why would you do that? You don't have to do that. But on some level, evidently they felt like they had to. And as I was talking to a mentor recently about it, it's almost like people say, okay, I'm actually not worth this. You guys think I'm a genius. You guys think I'm perfect. You guys think I'm exactly the amazing genius, iconoclast, whatever fancy Merriam-Webster word you want to throw out there. Grab a thesaurus, throw it out there. But inside, I don't feel that. You all might say that. The crowd might say that. The populace might say that, but I don't feel that. And so I'm going to take myself down so you can see who I really am, because that feels like I'm being true to myself. It's not enough. It's not enough. The adoration of thousands, millions, in some cases, people, billions. And the more adoration they have, the more they feel like they're not worthy of it. And then they'll find ways to sabotage themselves. That's about as deep as it gets. Because, I mean, why wouldn't everyone wants to love themselves? So there must be something that's preventing them from doing so. And that's that deep work that I've talked about a lot since all the recent episodes have been a lot about deep work and going inside oneself. It's been a deep year for me. So I'm kind of taking you on my own journey. I'm far from perfect, but I'm doing the work. And that's all that can be asked of someone. Are you doing the work? If you're doing the work, then the chances of that self-sabotage become smaller and smaller. If you're not doing the work, if you're not exploring your shadow side or understanding the deeper side of the work of how you're showing up in the world, then that self-sabotage should come out. As I said in the newsletter at joindamon.me earlier today, that shadow side tends to come out right when we're at our pinnacle. With the Will Smith, Chris Rock incident, I guess that was a couple years ago now. And that's essentially what he said when he got the Oscar after the slap. He was like, yeah, and he said it in his own particular way. But it's the same thing where that came out when he was at one of his career pinnacles. You can name a celebrity and those things happen. If you're not doing that deeper work, then it's going to come out and bite you in the ass. You got to think about those particular things. That's why I really want to do this episode today. As you can tell, I can talk about this all day. I've been on my own journey with it, and it's real talk. It's real talk. So you're like, all right, I know what self-sabotage is. What am I supposed to do with it? First recommendation, one of my favorite books in the world. And as I've talked about, I've particularly this year, again, I'm working on myself a lot, and I have like castles now of books. Even after all those books and all the books I've read, even all the books that I've written, all that stuff, this is one of those ones, as they say. Easily top 25, maybe 50th book I've ever read in my life. I've read a lot of books. The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, fantastic. Let me stop. Let me stop ogling and going on and on about this book. Let me break it down to you. Number one, a lot of the theories and things that I've talked about in my books, there's like 5 or 6 of them that come from this book where I just started to think about these theories. So shout out to Gay Hendricks, for real, and expanded on them, of course, but expanded on them. We could do a whole episode on it. Maybe we will in the future. Jump in the chat if you'd like that. His book basically says we are the biggest limitation to our own success. Not in a sense of blame or that you should feel shame about it or if there's something wrong with you, more like we have mental limitations that prevent us from happening. There's quite a few theories in here. That's why I'm kind of stuttering. But my favorite theory in here, and that's tough to say, is the upper limit problem. You call it a ULP if you want. The upper limit problem basically says You want to go over here, but you feel like you deserve to be over here. And so once you start to veer over here and get higher and higher, better and better, have that success, have that money, have that beautiful love of your life, whatever, whatever, then that upper limit problem comes in and says, no, 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 that's not who you are. I think the Gay uses it as the description he uses, if I remember correctly. He has quite a few analogies. It's like a thermostat. And so again, it's about 107, 108. We actually have a temperature warning here in Las Vegas. So it's about 108, 109 here. Again, that's why you see the little sweat on my head. And our air conditioner is working, and it's still hot as heck in here. But it works like air conditioner. I'm not air conditioner, a thermostat, or more like a temperature gauge, where if it goes up to say 80 degrees, but you have it set for 74 degrees, then temperature, the AC or whatever the equivalent is going to kick in. And it's going to be like, no, 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 Damon. No, you said that you were at 74 degrees. Now you're at 80. We're going to turn you down. And it could be 79 degrees. It could go all the way down to 70 degrees. Because it's like that little thing in your mind says, no, that's not who I am. I have a lot of relatives that are from the hood. I'm originally from South Jersey. I spent a little bit of time there, but that's not where I was raised, mostly suburban and urban areas. And we talk about that all the time. Shout out to Camden, New Jersey. We talk about that all the time, where you can get out of the hood, out of the rougher areas. Again, Camden back then, as well as now, is pretty rough. Much love to my folks that are out there. But once you leave, nice Freudian slip there. Once you leave that particular area, you still could have the same mindset of the people there that might be a little bit more limited. Not all the people, but some of the people. So I know Tim Ferriss had talked about this recently, where his family grew up with very modest means. And now, like, he's very well known. He's probably been a millionaire several times over at this point, especially with his investments. But he'll still, I think it was some example he gave where he'll still buy the cheapest brand of toilet paper. And it's just like, right, but it's not good for his body. He's around my age, so we're both middle age, and it's like, you can buy the Charmin. It's okay. you don't have to buy the great value. No shots at great value. We have some of it. But do you understand what I'm saying? There's a level of limitation. And that's what he means by upper limit problem. So if you're a janitor and you've been told you're going to be a janitor, and nothing wrong with being a janitor, and then you get the opportunity to be, say, principal of that same school, and it happens like that, there's going to be certain transitions, and they have to be conscious that you're going to have to go through to make sure that you're ready for that leap. Again, the big leap. That's just one of the many, many great theories on it. Again, I might do a whole show about it. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to do that. But I can talk about it all day. It's a fantastic book to start if you're trying to do less self-sabotage. And aren't we all? A good companion to this is a recent compilation I did, a beginner's guide to how to know yourself more. I had a live show talking about understanding your shadow, had a couple other shows understanding the parts of us that we don't see. There's something called the Johari window, where there's certain things that people see and certain things that people don't see, and the same for you. I'm not going to go and break in. I've done whole videos on it. Feel free to look up Johari, Johari, in the comments or on bringyourworth.tv and see what's happening. But basically, there's certain parts of ourselves that we don't see, but that's reflective of how we show up in the world. If that's the case, then it's better for us to understand and empower ourselves in that regard. This episode gets to all of that. It's probably about an hour and a half, might even be shorter than that, might even only be an hour long, but it's like 3 or 4 different techniques and tools in there, including a live show to break down what those insights would look like to do less self-sabotage, understand your shadow self better. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown. You're watching Bring Your Worth TV every Wednesday at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time, as well as some bonus episodes as you see. Subscribe for free at the link below. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. And while you're out there, go and check out the best of collection, the complete Bring Your Worth collection, available everywhere fine books are sold. Excuse me. All right, let's get into the next one. How do you prevent self-sabotage? Decent question. If you have any questions, jump in the comments and let me know. I think it comes down to 2 basic things. First of all, you have to know what your insecurities are as I talked about in the newsletter this morning at joindamon.me. It's almost like knowing what your Achilles heel is. And the second part is having strategies in mind around that Achilles heel, around that insecurity. I was talking to a relative lately and recently, and they were talking about they wanted to start a project, and they tend to make it big. So it's like, okay, I'm going to do this small thing. Well, why don't I add this into it? Well, why don't I make it bigger? Well, if I'm going to do that, I might as well make it bigger. And it's just, and you can almost see it expanding. But at the same time, that idea is expanding, which works for some people. I can be like that. So I tend to be expansive. So that works. But while my loved one was doing this, I could also see the fear start to come in their eyes as far as, wait, how am I going to do this? But it was like they kept expanding. It's like, and in many cases, if we have that particular type of framework, then we're just not going to start. Right? It's almost like, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to make a Lego model. You tell them play with Legos, except for with my kids. I'm going to do a Lego model of, let's say, a building. I'm just going to do a building. Wait, well, why don't I make a building next door? Why don't I make the people that are walking to the buildings? Why don't I make a neighborhood? Why don't I make a city? Why don't I make a replica of Las Vegas? And that excitement is there, and it's like, okay, but I haven't put down one brick. I don't even have enough bricks. That's too much. Let me move on to the next thing. That is a self-sabotage, because there's a certain Achilles heel and insecurity where it's like, if I do something small, essentially, that's not going to be enough. What I do has to be big. Otherwise, people aren't going to appreciate it. I won't feel good about it. So let me make it as big as possible. Oh, but I don't have the follow through to actually do this big thing. And if I can't do this big thing, I'm not going to do it at all. Example from me. I told you I was going to bring out some of my dirty laundry. Was me being a kid, and my kids are 8 and 10, around that same age, particularly around the age of my eldest. And my room was so messy. Looking back decades later, I'm like, oh my God, how did I sleep? You know, I mean, we were in a safe neighborhood. There weren't any issues in the house, but something could have been hanging out in my room the whole time and just crawled out at night, and it would have been fine. For someone who has an active imagination, I don't know how I managed to have papers and whatever other stuff that I had on the floor and still sleep very well at night. Of course, my parents were like, Damon, you got to clean your room, get your stuff together. But I'm very self-motivated, which is a gift and a curse. I'm assuming a lot of y'all are too, since a lot of us are entrepreneurs, right? It's kind of the nature of self-motivation. F you, I'm not going to do what you tell me. Shout out to Suicidal Tendencies, the group, right? But that whole thing, it's like, I wasn't having it, but I was comfortable with that. But what I learned later is that for high achievers, I got a TV show, I got best-selling books. I'm sitting here sweating 110-degree heat. It keeps going up, right? I'm sweating in 110-degree heat in a blazer because I want to show up for y'all. Tell me I'm not an overachiever. For overachievers like us, right? They're not like us, right? Overachievers like us, we're more likely to have that extreme mindset, which I'll get into a little bit later on in the show. Stay tuned for that. And so it's like the room is so messy, I'm not going to do it at all because I know it's going to get messy again. The daily chores and all that, I don't want to do that because I already ate 3 times today. I have to do the same thing over again tomorrow. Yeah, I already made a mess in my room. I got to clean it now, but it's going to get messy again. So why not just skip that? It's almost like you're too smart. It's like, skip that, right? Too smart in air quotes. Trust me on that. So there had to be ways for me to structure things where, my office is a little bit messy, but not anywhere near what it was. And obviously messy because I'm doing a lot of things. And like I mentioned in previous episodes, I'm doing a lot of projects. So this is actually not the default. My default is having a clean office. But the cleanliness comes in me doing little things at once. Saying, okay, I'm going to have a snack in here, which I rarely do in the office, but I'm going to make sure I throw it away. I have my coffee. Okay, let me make sure I clean my coffee mug and move on. And do that while it's happening. That allows the self-sabotage to at least be, contained. As I said in the earlier analogy, you can't stop self-sabotage. We're naturally insecure. We naturally have our Achilles heel. We naturally have our issues. In some ways, as some psychologists said it, I forgot who said it, I wish I could remember, but they said our issues are essentially our personality. Those things we call personality are actually based on our issues. And if you want to get really deep, also based on our trauma and whatever came from that. Whole another episode that we actually had earlier this year. And in fact, if you go to the previous episode I just talked about, as far as, let me find the link for you guys. You know what I'm talking about if you just joined in. Here we go. How to know yourself better, beginner's guide. I talk about this. The link is right below, just to make sure I didn't neglect you guys who just got into the show. So if you know what your Achilles heel are, again, knowing yourself, then you're able to create strategies to get around that. That's the key thing. You're not going to stop your issues. There's always so much healing from, trauma healing, whatever you want to call it, you can do, because some are scars, which are past tense, and some are wounds where they're always going to be a little bit open for you. It's just going to be insecurity. That's part of humanity. And trust me on this one, I've worked really hard working on my stuff, particularly again, as of the last several months or last couple of years, even deeper than I normally do. And those things are still there. So you find ways to work around them or even make peace with them. I'm insecure about certain things. I've talked about it in my books. That's kind of what it is. But that humanity allows me to connect with you and vice versa. And then we might even come up with strategies that allow us to overperform. One other quick example, I talked about this. It's definitely in the Complete Bring Your Worth collection. I can't remember which book. I want to say it's in The Ultimate Bites as Entrepreneur. You might be able to tell I have a slight lisp. And I had a really strong lisp. Like, people weren't able to understand me back when I was starting kindergarten. So really high reading capacity or communication level. It's probably like fourth or fifth grade communication level while I was going into kindergarten, first grade. So I was always really into communication. Other things, strengths weren't as high. So this isn't a flex. I was just saying I was overperforming in communication. So you can imagine how hard it was when people couldn't understand what I was saying because I had such a bad lisp. Fast forward now, and I've done 27 books. I've been on various TED stages. I got the show. There's 18,000 plus subscribers as of this premiere, and I'm about to hit 400 episodes. And I have 2 degrees in journalism. Shout out to Northwestern and Oakland University. So that's what I mean. Like, that insecurity, those challenges, as far as saying people don't understand what I'm saying. I overperformed in that in such a ridiculous way where it's like, people are like, "Oh, you're a great communicator." And I'm all like, "Am I?" Because that insecurity is still there. That's what I mean. If I didn't take that and understand that communication was an Achilles heel of mine and recognize that I felt insecure about it, then there wouldn't be anything I could do about it. If I was just like big and bold and like, I communicate fine, blah, 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 and I felt that way all the time, you can imagine the self-sabotage that would have stopped me from getting my master's in magazine publishing, would have sure as hell wouldn't have got me on the TED stage. Like, all that stuff wouldn't have happened, I don't think. Or I would have sabotaged it before it would have happened. So that's what I mean by being able to prevent it. It's not about being able to take it away or suddenly feel better. It's not going to go away. It's more like, I'm going to find ways to recognize it, know my insecurities are, and then to come up with strategies to process and deal with it so that I can, at baseline, be functional in my life. Otherwise, the sabotaging does not stop because you haven't healed, recognized what you need to heal from. Speaking of strategy, why plans don't work, do this instead. It's actually one of my favorite episodes. It's one of the less watched episodes. And it's like that little episode that could, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this episode. I love the theory behind it. It's basically the difference between a plan and a strategy. I'm not even going to get into it here. It's a super short episode, like 6 minutes long. Check it out, please. Please do me a favor, check it out. But it gets into this where the short version of it is that a plan is temporary and fixed. And the strategy is more flexible and allows you to have long-term thinking, which is what we're really getting at here. Speaking of that, man, I'm hitting all my favorite books today. Upstream by Dan Heath. Shout out to Dan. Fantastic book. I have the audiobook, but I don't have the physical book. I need to buy the physical book, so I need to grab it. Maybe I'll put it on my Father's Day list. But fantastic book. The basic premise is that there's downstream and there's upstream, like a river. If you know how a river goes, there's going up the river and there's going down the river. What you want to do is look upstream at issues that might be coming up so that when they hit the downstream to where you are, they're not an issue anymore. So many, similar to Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap, there's so many good theories in this, like a ridiculous amount of good theories. One of my favorite ones, and I forget the name of the theory. Lots of theory terms in there. I forget the name of the theory, but the basic idea is that we often think we're doing well when we're able to do well in a crisis. We'll put it like that. It's like, oh, this thing happened and I was able to show up here. And this thing happened, I was able to show up here. What we undervalue, though, is making decisions that prevents the crisis from happening at all. And the problem is that when you prevent something from happening, mentally you don't get credit for it. And no one else gives you credit for it either. Right? So if something like the printer suddenly catches on fire at your office job and you're able to put the fire out, they're gonna be like, Jim, 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 and they're gonna give you a crown and parade you around and say, you saved our company. But if 3 months before you were Bob and you notice that the printer had some type of logistical issue with it and it might cause a fire, you could fix it without getting paid, run by your boss and say, hey, looked like there might be a future issue with the printer, so I just went in and fixed it. They'd be like, all right, thank you, Bob. And then they go back to drinking their coffee or doing their reports or whatever. Total stereotypes here. I'm thinking Office Space or The Office. Pick one. Do you see the difference? Upstream is basically saying you want to be like Bob. You want to just stop it before it even becomes an issue. But we have to train our brains for that. One of the biggest trainings about it is that you're not going to get as much credit for it. There's things that I've done within my family. There's things I've done within my businesses. There's things that I've done as a coach where I saw stuff down the line and I'm like, okay, we're going to change this. And might not even have said anything. If you're going to do that, which I think is true leadership, if you're going to do that, just assume you're not going to get credit for it. In fact, there was an excellent book, and I cannot remember which book it was, but it began with a great analogy, talking about a medicine person. And this is back in the day. It might have been like the Andes or somewhere like that, but ages ago. And a medicine person, to paraphrase briefly, what wasn't well known. And I think someone came up and said, hey, you do all this great work. Why aren't you well known? Why aren't they praising you? And the medicine person said, well, if they were praising me, then it would have been too late. They're going to praise when they're sick already. They're going to praise when there's a crisis. When they actually see the magnitude of the situation and then I'm able to fix it, they're going to praise it. But I do good work because I'm able to stop it before it even begins. So that's what upstream is. As soon as I find that book, I definitely will include it in one of the episodes. I wish I could remember what book it is. Like I said, I've read a ridiculous amount of books. It was a great analogy that began the book. Upstream is basically giving you the tools to be that medicine person, to say, hey, this is how I'm going to go ahead and show up in my life, in my business, to my colleagues, to the world. I'm going to do this in this particular way, and that will prevent these bigger things from happening. Again, back to the self-sabotage. Love that book. Highly recommend it. Can't recommend it more. Shout out to Dan. You made a killer book. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown. I'm here to help you as a side hustler or solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You're watching Bring Your Worst Show. You subscribe for free at the link below. I come to you every Wednesday at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. Like I said, it's hot as Alvin over here. Welcome to June in Las Vegas. All right. If you have any questions or comments, throw them in the chat. Are there moments where you are about to self-sabotage and you're able to prevent it? Jump in there, share some stuff. I'm happy to share mine. All right. When it comes to self-sabotage, how can I recover from it? Really, really good question. I think it's an important question when it comes to understanding, kind of accepting is going to happen. And I think it comes down to three basic things. When self-sabotage happens and you recognize it, it's really important. Number one, you have to give yourself grace. It happens to everybody. Number two, you have to make sure you got support around you. So to remember that you are loved no matter what you do. And number three, and this gets back to the previous question, to take the long view, take the macro view, look at the big versus the small. Let's start with the first one. Giving grace to yourself essentially means you accept that you're human and you are going to be off the mark sometimes, you're going to make mistakes. And that's part of the game. That's kind of how it works. No one came here being a genius and getting everything perfect. No one. And so, and if people tell you that they are, then that means they really, really have some big insecurities. So no one is like that. No one is perfect. So accepting that and maybe even giving yourself some slack and some ease when it comes to you making progress. So it might be a thing of you self-sabotage all the time, and then suddenly you're in a situation and it's like you stop right before the cliff, Wile E. Coyote or Roadrunner style. You're like, oh, almost did it. Wait. And you reflect for a second. And then you do it anyway. That reflection is growth. Even if you end up self-sabotaging anyway, that 1, 2, 3 second delay, right? As the saying goes, there's the gap between response and no, I'm forgetting another one. The gap between response and reaction. The gap between reaction and response, that's where the wisdom is. So you're ready to react to something, especially if you're mad or something, you're ready to react. But then if you pause long enough, then you actually can have a response. Something that actually matches the situation. It's almost like a level of emotional intelligence. You might self-sabotage anyway. I'm gonna keep it real with you. I've been there. But what was the process right before you self-sabotaged? Were you more reflective? Did you realize you might be self-sabotaging, but you convince yourself otherwise and I'm doing it? As you keep working on that, the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you get that level of awareness. The books, the tools, the videos that I'm giving you today, hopefully will help with that awareness, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Trust me, that gap can only get wider, but it's never gonna, that tension's never gonna go away. It's kind of how it works. Again, you see the gray hairs in my chin, so I've been around long enough. It doesn't go away. You get better at it, but it never goes away. Once you accept it doesn't go away, I think you can give yourself more grace, because I think often we're hard on ourselves because we believe it's going to go away. And it's like, no, actually, it doesn't go away at all. Like that's not how it works. Number one, if you want to recover from it, you have to accept that some level of grace for yourself, and then whatever you deal with, it's not going to go away. The second thing is bringing lots of support, and that could be your blood family, your chosen family, your loved ones, your friends, your colleagues, your partner, whatever, your kids, your parents, doesn't matter. But someone to go and say, yeah, you did that and you're still okay. Yeah, you did that and you're still loved. Even connecting with other people who might have a similar self-sabotage thing, where like I have so many people in my life that consider themselves perfectionists, and they could talk, and I'm not a perfectionist, but as you can tell by like I'm kind of more of a launcher than a perfectionist, but that's a whole nother episode. But the thing is that I'll see them have conversations and I'll have no idea what they're saying. And I'm like, what are y'all talking about? I don't, and they're like, oh, well, you're not really a perfectionist. I'm like, no, so I don't know what the hell you're talking about. If you're watching, you know who you are. And I was like, oh, okay. But that's bonding. That's giving each other grace, not just giving yourself grace, giving each other grace. Be like, yeah, I get it. It's hard. I want everything to be perfect, and I gotta let that stuff go. I can't relate to that, but they found people that they can relate to. Again, I got other issues, so it's like I find people that have like issues, and those people in some ways became, my chosen family. So shout out to them. Again, you know who you are, but finding other people that will give that grace to you and remind you that you're worthy of whatever you happen to be pursuing. And lastly, taking the long view of it. You see me becoming very New Jersey right now, using my hands all the time, but very long view. So if it's something that you self-sabotaged and it was say a job offer, are there going to be other job offers? Were there reasons why, actual reasons why the job wasn't a good fit for you? Are there going to be other opportunities that are similar to that particular job? Do you need a job right now, or can you wait a little bit longer? Is it a dire situation? Like just that one idea, you can try and do the calculus on it, bring out the abacus and be like, oh, this wasn't life or death. Some situations are life or death. I've been in a couple, so let's keep it real. Sometimes it is that, but most of the time it isn't. And it's like the main thing that's hurting right now is your ego. I got a big one, so I get it. And sometimes it's like that's the main thing that hurts. And it's like, all right, if you can nurse that, then you'll be all right and move on to the next thing. So if you're trying to recover from a self-sabotage situation, like it already happened, not while it's happening, but it already happened, it's done, then you want to give yourself grace. You want to be surrounded by people that will also give you grace. And you want to take the long view and decide how really important that thing is. Sometimes it is really important, but sometimes the main thing, Bruce, is your ego. Here's an episode, having a long-term vision beyond now. It's actually a really short kind of experimental episode I did probably about a year and a half ago, but it was like various clips from the previous episodes talking about having a long-term vision. I think the whole episode's like 6 minutes long. It's very short, but it's like 3 or 4 different little episodes. I think you might enjoy it. And I rediscovered it again. I'm approaching 400 episodes, so I don't remember all of them to be honest. But I was exploring my show a few days ago for an upcoming project. You can look for it in the upcoming days. You'll get a notification when it comes out. I was working on this project and I came across this and I'm like, you know what, that would kind of fit the vibe as far as thinking long term, and also being generous and gentle and having grace with ourselves as much as possible. And the classic, shout out to Dr. Carol Dweck, the classic mindset. You might not have heard of the book Mindset. It's an unusual title, but you probably have heard of fixed mindset and growth mindset. A fixed mindset and a growth mindset. If you're watching this channel, you probably have heard of this before, even in passing, but let's break it down. A fixed mindset says, this is who I am. This is my view on the world. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm not good at. This will never change. I am good at math. I am bad at science. Fixed mindset. Excuse me. Growth mindset says, I'm not great at math right now. Or I'm sorry, I'm really good at math right now. When I get to higher levels of math, I might have some challenges. I suck at science right now, but maybe when I get to chemistry, I'm going to be okay. Or maybe biology will be my thing. Let's do biology instead. The difference is one person is saying, this is who I am. I can never change. It's almost like being whatever you have from birth. Like I have a birthmark. Like it's like having a birthmark. It's like, no, this is what I am. I'm doomed to this, right? It's almost like the class society. You know what I mean? Where you get into the different rankings. Like, okay, you're born of shopkeepers. You're going to be a shopkeeper the rest of your life. You got some kids. They're going to be shopkeepers too forever. That's the energy of a fixed mindset. A growth mindset, as it implies, says, okay, this is who I am right now. This one thing could happen, or more importantly, I could grow, hence growth. I could grow in a certain way so that this isn't true anymore. When I first started the channel, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. All my episodes are up there. You can go back to episode 1. And yeah, it looks like I'm being held in an underground cave against my will. I'll leave it at that with the lighting and all that stuff. But at that moment, you got a choice. You, meaning all of us. You could say, okay, this kind of sucks. I think I'm going to stop because I'm going to suck. 400 episodes in, I'm still going to suck. And I'm about to hit my 400th episode. So speaking from experience, that's the fixed mindset. Or you can do the growth mindset and say, yeah, this sucks. But I wonder if I can do a little bit of research, get a little bit better lighting. And you notice I was tripping over a couple of my words. Maybe I could script it out as opposed to freestyling. Maybe I can do that. And then episode 2 comes. And it's like, oh, the lighting's a little bit better. Maybe I shouldn't have the window open, especially here in the desert. I live in Las Vegas. Maybe I shouldn't have the window open because the light's really harsh, and it's like even for my brown skin, it's like blanking me out. Nobody can see me. Why don't I roll down the windows, get some blinds, and then have stronger light? Okay, and those adjustments happen. Growth is really about adjustments. It's about saying, I'm here right now. If I'm willing to make these adjustments, these not sacrifices, that's a little bit too dramatic, but if I'm willing to put the work in, back when I was talking about work at the beginning of the episode, if I'm willing to put the work in, then I'm confident this will improve. I don't know if I'm going to be like on this level, but I definitely can be better than where I am right now. That mindset helps with the self sabotage as far as it not happening. Because if you have a fixed mindset, then you're basically saying, wow, let's go back to the job thing. Well, I was in a job interview and I said something really stupid again. All right, well, I guess I'm not good at job interviews, so I'll just stop interviewing for jobs, which sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. But some folks have that mentality, and it's like, even if they don't say it out loud, it's like, okay, you're just not gonna interview for jobs anymore. I hope you like entrepreneurship, right? What else are you gonna do? Okay, all right, good luck, right? Come watch Damon's show. But where a growth mindset will come in and say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and I suck at job interviewing. I'm going to take a LinkedIn thing and I'm going to go ahead and figure out, like, you know how LinkedIn has the classes, right? They used to call it something else. That's why I'm forgetting the name of it. But their new class system where it's like, okay, this is a certain class I'm going to take, and it's about how to interview people or how to be. I'm used to interviewing people as journalists, how to be interviewed and so forth. And I'm going to take that, and maybe I'll be like 1 or 2%, maybe even 10% better. So I'll go to the next job interview and I'm ready to go. Those are the differences of the two things, for sure. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you, Modern Air. Yeah, like for real. Like, yeah, that's how it works. Thank you. But I've been there, even though I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I've also done a big share of job interviews. Some of them were such different status that they would have changed the course of my career. And it didn't work out, obviously. I'm so happy to be here and do this, but also I'm all like, wow, I could have handled that differently. But that's also part of what we were talking about in the previous question. That's part of the grace. Thank you for your comment, Mountaineer. But that's part of the discussion. And Dr. Dweck's book talks about that and basically says these are the two frameworks. It's a really simple book, and it's a classic book. I don't think I got into it till almost about 10 years ago. And by then, it was already in its like third or fourth edition and had been out for like 15 years or something. So this book is like classic, like a quarter century old. Fantastic book. It's not more complicated than I'm explaining it. Or actually, I actually might be explaining it more complicated than Dr. Dweck does. But fantastic book if you want a quick, simple read and understanding how you can have a better mentality, and especially stopping the self-sabotage. This is a good trifecta. Again, I'm so excited about the books today. Number 1, The Big Leap. Number 2, Upstream. And number 3, get my fingers right. Number 3, Mindset. All 3 are just killer. They should be on your shelf. I have them all. I have Mindset somewhere around here. I have Upstream, an audiobook, and I have The Big Leap, an audiobook. Both of those audiobooks, by the way, are fantastic. I don't know the audiobook of Mindset, but the links are there. All the stuff is there. However, whatever framework or mindset you want to run with. That is today's show. And our topic today was how to stop self-sabotage. Everything I talked about, I get the words out of my mouth. Everything I talked about, all the links are below, including the books, the videos, all that. I'm really excited about today's show because I think there's some really good information in here. And if it's almost like when there's a song that you love, or even a book that you love, which is the case for me, and someone hasn't heard it or read it yet, you get all excited. I'm at that point because these 3 books are like ridiculously good. So shout out to all the authors. I know how hard it is to write books. So you guys did some classics. Once again, I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown, helping you as a side hustler, a solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. Bring Word Show is live every Wednesday at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. I might be doing some reruns, a couple things. This summertime, I got my little boys. So we'll see where it goes. But I look forward to connecting with you all during the summer. And you can subscribe for free. If I happen to be having an off week or doing a rerun, this episode 384. Like, I don't know what y'all want. Like, you got 383 other episodes to watch. If you watch all of them, congratulations. If you haven't, which is most of you, go through the archives, see what's happening. And hopefully I can be part of your summer. And shout out to my folks down under, winter viewing. Until next time, remember you can always bring your worth. You can always build from now. Take care of yourselves and others.